1, 2, 3, 4. Welcome to Crazy Chester. Welcome to Crazy Chester. Crazy Chester's Radio Hour. Welcome to Crazy Chester. Welcome to Crazy Chester. Crazy Chester's Radio Hour. Yeah, Crazy Chester's Radio Hour. Crazy Chester's Radio Hour.
Welcome to the Crazy Chester Radio Hour. My name is Andreas Werner. I'm a record producer, songwriter, and owner of Crazy Chester Records. My guest today is Kelvin Holly, guitarist extraordinaire from Muscle Shoals. Kelvin is a member of the Decoys, the Amazing Rhythm Aces, and Fathers and Sons, and he was also a member of Little Richard's band and Pegi Young and The Survivors. Pegi Young sadly passed away between us recording this interview and today. Kelvin also recorded with Gregg Allman, Bobby Blue Bland, Candi Staton, Paul Thorn, Bettye LaVette, Bonnie Bramlett, Jimmy Hall, just to name a few. Welcome to the Crazy Chester Radio Hour, Kelvin.
Happy to be here.
Thanks for being my guest today. I met you when you were playing with the Decoys, which you still are, and it immediately became one of my favorite bands. And not only that, but also like your guitar playing.
Oh man, thank you.
Because it's like, if it ever looked effortless on anyone,
I've had a lot of people
it looks
say that for some
effortless
reason.
on you.
Yeah.
And you know, I can tell you're having fun. I had Will McFarlane in here earlier, and you know, we talked about we're really not getting paid to play. We're getting paid to get to the gig, to travel,
well,
to set up, and all that.
That's always been my philosophy about that. You know, music's free. We get paid to pick up amplifiers and move them around.
Yeah. So let's go back to the beginning. You were actually born in New Jersey because your dad was in the Army, right?
Air Force. Yeah.
Air Force.
Mm-hmm.
And you got to travel quite a bit as a child.
Yeah, but you know, not quite as much as some military families that we knew. I mean, we were actually stationed, he was, at Seward Air Force Base, which is in Smyrna, Tennessee, which is just south of Nashville. And I mean, we lived there for a long time, you know, up to the time almost when I was 13 years old. And then, of course, we moved overseas to Turkey. And then I spent the majority of my teen years spent overseas, you know.
Yeah, there's a German connection there too.
Well, yeah, my mother's German, so when we left Turkey, I think we were in Turkey for 2.5 years, and then my dad got orders to go to Vietnam, so for a year. And so rather than us go back to the States, we decided to go to Munich, my mom's home, and we lived there for the year that he was in Vietnam. You know, I loved it. I didn't want to leave, you know. But then he came back, and he got orders to go to Tacoma, Washington. I can't remember the Air Force Base. So we were all prepared to move to Washington State, and then at the last minute they changed it to Montgomery, Alabama.
And that's where you...
That's how I ended up in Alabama in, I think, 1970.
Is there where you started making music, or did you before?
Yeah. Well, that's where I got serious. You know, I was in garage bands and stuff, you know, playing with your buddies and, you know, trying to learn the instrument, and, you know, it was an obsession with me. I mean, I just loved it, you know, still is, so.
Do you remember what your first band was called?
Oh, wow. Oh, yeah. The Reverbs.
All right.
Yeah, it was like excuse me, it's probably around 1965, I guess, something like that. Of course, the Beatles was the deal, you know.
Did you watch that at Sullivan Show in '64?
Yeah, I didn't even know it was going to be on. I just came home from playing a baseball game, Little League baseball. I was probably 10, maybe a little older, I don't remember. I just remember that was the thing. We watched the Ed Sullivan Show on Sundays, you know. And I remember distinctly my mother making spaghetti that night. And I made a bowl of spaghetti, and I just sat down in front of the TV, and Ed Sullivan came on, the Beatles came on, and my jaw just went in the spaghetti, and I was just like, wow. You know, it was the first time I'd seen like a band of guys playing their own music. You know, it was just mind altering for me. You know, I woke up the next morning and I said, wow, you know, this is what I want to do for the rest of my life, you know. And the next day at school, everybody and their brother were starting bands, you know.
Yeah, all across the country too.
Yeah. I think a lot of it too had to do with the girls screaming. You know, you're at that age, you know, you start getting interested in the opposite sex, you know.
Yeah. So, and then you moved to Montgomery area, and that had a pretty vibrant music scene, I guess, at that time, because there's quite a few people coming out of that scene that are still active and very much still successful, like Tommy Shaw, Beth Nielsen Chapman, Bill Hines, who's in Rick Kurtz.
Rick, I think, was down around the Panhandle area. I mean, Florida Panhandle, you know, like Panama City or Destin or somewhere like that, you know, Mobile.
Yeah. Was Harvest the first like bigger band you were a part of? Or?
Yeah, you know, at the time I didn't really think about the bigger band thing, you know, but you knew which bands were popular, you know, in a local music scene. You knew which ones were popular, but you know, when I graduated high school down there, I joined a very popular band at the time, you know, and then I met Bill. You know, he was 15, I was like 17, something like that. And then we started hanging out and playing together, you know, but eventually, you know, I got asked to come play with Harvest, you know, because Tommy Shaw had left. What happened was Tommy Shaw left to go play with Styx. This was probably around 75 or 6, you know. And so when he left, they got Beth. You know, Beth was pretty young too. She was like 18 when she started playing with him. Then I think the reason they got her because she was a good vocalist and she could do Joni Mitchell like Joni. You know, I mean, it was like really good. And then at some point they decided they wanted an electric guitar player, so I got that job. You know.
Did you ever go to a recording studio with that band?
Well, oddly enough, I mean, we played a bowling alley lounge down there for as long as I was with them. I mean, it was like a staple. It was packed every night, you know. And wasn't a big place or not, but out of the blue one night, Robert Byrne came in. And he came up to us like on a break, and we started talking. He said he lived up here, and he was a songwriter and all this and that and the other. And then he came back up here and told Tommy Brassfield about us, which Tommy was a staple around this part, you know, for years. And so Robert brought Tommy down there, and he heard us. Then he came back up here and told Terry Woodford and Clayton Ivey they had Wishbone. So I think Terry may have come down there the next time. Anyway, long story short, we ended up coming up to here to record at Wishbone, you know. And they signed us to like a production deal, and we cut maybe 7 or 8 songs, you know. And that was another mind-altering experience for me because it was kind of really the first time I'd been into like a legit recording studio, you know, with incredible musicians, I thought, at the time, so.
Did any of that ever get released?
No, I mean, they tried to get deals and stuff, you know. But oddly enough, after about a year, I left and moved to Memphis. Beth ended up starting her solo career basically because from where we started there at Wishbone, you know. She ended up leaving, came back up here and worked with Barry Beckett, you know. So.
How did Harmony happen?
Well, you know, we were Harvest. Before we came to Wishbone, we were Harvest. And out of the blue one day, this is in my recollection, Terry Woodford said, because we had a lot of vocal harmony, and he decided that we should change our name to Harmony, that he thought it worked better, you know. So we said, okay, whatever. So that's how that happened.
But it was the same band.
It was the same band, yeah.
And although that's a long time ago, not too long ago, you guys actually did a reunion show.
Yeah, you know, sometimes those things are fun, you know, because I love all those guys, and they're great players. I love playing with them, and, you know, they were some of my best friends still, really, but a friend of theirs, I didn't really know him, but he was a guitar player in Montgomery, got cancer, and you know they decided they needed to do a benefit. So that's how that first reunion happened, and we had so much fun that we've done a few since then, you know. And it's really good. It's really cool.
And you and Bill Hines over the years have collaborated on different things too.
Well,
like the
Bill and I
Paul
played a lot
Thorn.
together in bands. We put bands together. We, you know, we taught a lot. We taught each other a lot, you know, I think. I learned a lot from him, I know that, because he's phenomenal guitar player, musician, you know. And of course, you know, as you do in music, you go your separate ways, but you still, you know, it's a big part of your memory, you know. So they were great times, you know.
Were you in a band in Memphis too?
Well, when I left Harmony, I had an offer from some guys from the band Black Oak, Arkansas. And, you know, they were all still, that band was splintered into a whole nother thing, you know. I think Jim Dandy was the only original guy left, so. But, you know, I kind of looked at it as an opportunity to get out of what I was doing, because I started feeling like things were not going to go well, you know. And so I moved to Memphis and started doing that, you know.
And then you moved here in '91?
Yeah.
Was that around the same time you ended up in the Decoys?
Well, I ended up in the Decoys. It was more like the end of '89, early '90. I mean, I just at the time I was in my first marriage. I was living in Athens, Alabama. I played 5 nights a week in Huntsville. Me and Bill Hines. Yeah. I mean, I played that gig for 3.5 years. Bill was there like 5 nights a week. And you're talking about, you know, playing. We played a lot, you know.
What was that band called?
T-Mac. It was a popular band over there, you know, and I mean, we did a lot of dueling guitar stuff, you know, and it was a good band. It was a good rock band, you know.
Is that how you got on Johnny Sandlin's radar?
I think so. I'm trying to remember how exactly it went down, but I remember getting a phone call from him one day. Said he got my number from somebody he knows, and said that he lived in Decatur and had a band called the Decoys and had a studio, and they needed a guitar player, you know. Would I be willing to come audition? I went, sure, you know. And so that led to another life-changing experience, was hooking up with those guys, you know.
yeah, that's, been going on ever since, pretty
Yeah,
much.
I mean, it's been going on ever since. I mean, who would have ever thought? I mean, how many bands stay together almost 30 years, And, I mean, chances are, had their health, turned for the worse, we'd still be doing it, I mean, we still are, but anytime somebody passes away, it's never the same,
Especially with Scott being, the
He was
the lead
it was-
singer and
yeah.
kind of the main guy there in many ways.
Exactly. I mean,
So-
he and I were the original part of that original deal.
Was that when you went to that audition? Is that when you met Scott for the first time?
Of course, I was a huge Capricorn Records guy, fan, all through the '70s, well, ever since they started. Of course, I knew who they were. I had no idea Johnny lived in Decatur. All I knew of Johnny was the work he did and seeing his name on the records, So when he called, I was like, wow, this is great. So, but yeah, musically and everything changed for me when I started playing with that band. That's where I found my voice as a guitar player,
Yeah, was the Scott Boyer and the Decoys, All My Friends album, the first recorded document that came out of that?
No, there's some other stuff, but it never really came out. We did Johnny had this idea to give us like an alias.
Well, I got this right here.
Scalded Dogs.
Call
To
off the
this
dog.
day, that's one of my favorites.
Okay, I didn't know that was actually happened before.
I think
this other
so.
one.
I mean, I could be wrong.
But
You'll have to look at the dates. I could be wrong, but that's one of my favorites.
this is a cool.
I don't
record,
even have
too.
a copy of that, by the way.
Well, I'll make you
I
one.
love it.
That is a cool one, and it's kind of, I guess, was somewhat connected because Russell Smith had his own like alter ego project.
Yeah, Run C&W.
Was that something? That's around the same time, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, that's a little different. Those are all original songs for the most part, Russell and them were doing like bluegrass Motown,
Yeah,
which was great. I mean, I still listen to it. So
it is great.
it's great. Me and Roger Hawkins, we went to Belgium for a month. It was shortly after that record came out. We went to Belgium for a month to tour with Luke Walter over there, and we had to drive to Holland every day for rehearsals, and we'd put Run C&W on, That's what we just loved it. So
And then the Decoys would have, I guess, different type of residencies, but one that a lot of people here in town seem to remember is the one at Union Station. Mm-hmm. And you also recorded a live record
Yeah,
that came out
we
on
did.
cassette there.
yeah, we had a rent-a-truck, and we just threw some recording stuff in the back, and Johnny's engineer, Steve Lowry, little Steve Lowry, recorded us. Turned out great,
Yeah.
But yeah, Union Station was it started out, Danny Lambert had a little pool hall is really what it was, over on 2nd Street. And somebody came up to us one night, would be interested maybe coming on a Tuesday night and just play, But he didn't have like tables and chairs, it was all pool tables. So they put plywood on top of the tables and put chairs around it. And slowly but surely we started building up this thing, and so, yeah, it was great, man.
And then you went to Fame to cut a studio record too. The Shot from the Saddle album.
Yeah.
That was after Union Station.
It was either after or it could have been kind of towards the end of it, I can't really remember. Sometimes all the years I get confused on,
And during that time, I guess you also started doing session work for Johnny Sandlin's projects. I
Played
guess
a lot
mainly
on
some Malaco stuff, I guess.
Malaco and
Just to name a few: Bobby Bland, Jimmy Hall, Chuck Leavell, Bettye LaVette was a little bit later. Mm-hmm. Eddie Mitchell, I have heard a funny story there.
Yeah,
Tim
Johnny
Wilson.
Halliday.
Bonnie Bramlett, Danny Brooks, Klaus Voormann, Paul Thorn, Tommy Tolton, Candi Staton, Gregg Allman. The list goes on and on. I had Steve Trash here. You played on Steve Trash's records.
Yeah.
So, what is like for you the difference live versus studio? Like as far as you being comfortable, or maybe also kind of preparing.
At heart, I love the recording process. It is different, I like playing live. I like the camaraderie with the musicians playing in the moment.
Yeah.
But I get the same. Every gig's different. Live gig's different. Every studio gig's different. Sometimes you feel really good about what you did. Sometimes you don't. The important thing is you can't force it. So you either suck one day or you don't. It's just life. So, but I've never aspired to be a studio musician. A lot of my best friends are studio musicians. It just never appealed to me. I always looked at it, if somebody likes the way I play and they think I'd be a good fit for their record, shoot, yeah, I'm on my all in, Yeah. But I do like getting a call because you never know who you're playing with a lot of times, and the creative process of putting a finished product together right there on the fly, it's pretty cool. So
yeah. You also joined the Amazing Rhythm Aces. How did that come about?
Well, you're the right place at the right time kind of thing. It's just fate. It's a lot about who you're hanging out with, and in this case, Butch McDade was our drummer. He was the original drummer in the Rhythm Aces, and he was playing drums with the Decoys. He ended up moving to Huntsville, and we met. And at the time, Roger, I think, Hawkins wasn't able to play anymore. Because at one time we had Roger and David was our rhythm section, But so Butch was playing with us, and then Russell Smith, who I didn't know at the time, wanted to put the band back together, original guys, But the two guitar players didn't want to do it. They had other things going on. So Butch and James Hooker suggested me, and they were just getting ready to start recording their comeback album, Out of the Blue. So I went to Lebanon, Tennessee, where we cut the record, and that was the first time I met Russell and Billy, and
Yeah, and everybody else was the original guys. Stick,
Butch
played
and
bass.
Hooker.
Yeah.
Stick was playing bass still, Jeff Davis. So it was all them minus Duncan and Bird, But I played a couple of songs, and Russell said, "Man, great." So I'm still playing with him.
Yeah.
So that's another band I've been with. I think '95 was when I first started. So.
And you did a second studio album with them, and
I did several.
I believe a live record too, or DVD anyway.
Yeah, I did the DVD in Australia. Yeah.
So that's been a gig, although it's not like full-time gig, but you've
No,
been doing
not
that
no.
for a long time. And then another gig you did for a long time was being Little Richard's guitar player.
Yeah.
How did
that was
come?
another about who you know or who you're hanging with. But at Union Station, I got to know a lot of the local musicians around here because it was a hangout on Tuesday night. I'd get a lot of them to come up and jam, but I met Travis and Wayne Chaney and Chalmers and Guy Higginbotham. They were all in Little Richard's band, So it came up where Richard wanted two guitar players, And I think it came down to Travis or Wayne or saying, well, we know a guy. And Richard called me up. I didn't believe it at first when they first called me, but I found myself flying to Los Angeles the next day. I met with him in his hotel room.
So for a while, it was actually you and Travis in the band?
Yeah,
at the
about
same
5
time?
or 6 shows, and then there was a European tour that got booked with Fats Domino, Chuck Berry, you know, and Travis and Monkey stayed behind, and that was it. So.
And you've done that till pretty
Almost
much
20
the end.
years.
Yeah.
I was with Richard. I was thinking, yeah, and I may have told you this in the past, but I played Percy Sledge's last show ever and Little Richard's last show ever. You know, everybody has a beginning and an ending. I just happened to end up at the very end with them. You know.
Yeah.
So it was an honor and an education to travel everywhere with Richard. You know.
And you did, was it the Tonight Show with him and Chuck Berry?
Yeah, it was the first time Richard and Chuck Berry had ever appeared together live on a TV show. You
That's a
know.
pretty good gig right there.
It was a trip, man. It was those two together are fire and water.
I bet. Now, more recently, you also joined Pegi Young's band, which at that time was married to Neil Young.
Right.
And was Spooner Oldham the one that made the connection because he
Well,
played with him
it was
before?
actually Spooner's wife, but even though, you know, Spooner and I have been friends for a long, long time, you know, but I knew that he had told me he'd been playing in Pegi Young's band. I didn't know that much about her other than she was Neil's wife, you know. So anyway, apparently they were rehearsing a tour, and the guitar player at the time, well, just decided he couldn't do it, you know, and they needed a guitar player like soon, you know. They were all kind of freaking out. Well, who are we gonna get? Who are we gonna get? You know. And anyway, Spooner called Karen to tell her what was going on, and she just said, "Well, what about Kelvin?" And kind of Spooner kind of, yeah. So Karen called me up, and I was at home, and she said, "What are you doing?" And I said, "Well, I'm laying on the couch. This is like 4 o'clock in the afternoon, you know." She said, "Well, can you get on a plane?" I said, "Yeah, what's going on?" And she told me, and anyway, they wanted me to fly out there that night, you know, and so I got it out for the next morning, but I flew out to Neil and Peggy's ranch, you know, and got the gig, you know, so.
Yeah, and more recently, Shauna Tucker, another
Well, our
Muscle
bass player, Rick Rosas, Rick the bass player, played with Neil and Joe Walsh for years, you know, amongst others. But he passed away, but I'd remember Peggy mentioning one night, well, I wish we could find a girl bass player, you know. And me and Spooner just kind of looked at each other and went, Shauna Lee Tucker, you know. So I got a hold of her, and, you know. But see, you know, in band circles and musician circles, it's always, you know, somebody, you know. And that's how you get a lot of gigs, is by knowing somebody, you know. So very rarely does it happen where somebody doesn't recommend you for a job or something because they know that you would be a fit maybe or something, you know. So.
Yeah, and you didn't just end up playing guitar, but on this most recent record, you and Spooner also co-wrote most of the songs with her.
Yeah, we did. Of course, you know, it's public knowledge that Peggy and Neil divorced, you know, so she was going through a really rough time, you know. And she had written a lot of lyrics, and some of them weren't very nice, you know. And anyway, we had done a series of gigs, and we ended up playing some big festival out in California. And I'll be danged if I can remember which one it was called. It's out there where they do Coachella and all that. Anyway, long story short, she just said, asked me and Spooner if we would hang there for a few days, you know, at the hotel. and sort through some of her lyrics. Maybe we could come up with some music. So she came down to my room, her and Spooner, and man, she laid all the lyrics out on the bed, and I'd pick up a stack, and I mean, we wrote a lot of songs in like 2 or 3 days, you know, which a lot of them ended up on the record. So
Yeah.
that's how that happened.
So more recently, you and Will McFarlane been joining forces and do the Fathers and Sons.
Yeah, you know, I've always enjoyed playing in a band with a guitar player that's better than me.
Well, he would probably say the same thing.
Well, I don't know. It's a mutual admiration, I'm sure. But you know, Will and I, we've known each other a while, but it was always we were on a gig together, like the Hall of Fame shows, or we were on a session together. And one day we were talking, and we were saying, you know, we ought to put together a band just for fun and maybe try to get a gig. And so we did, and so that's what we're doing. I mean, you know, like tonight, you know, we play every Tuesday at Florence-Lauderdale, downtown Florence, and it's a ball. You know, we have a great time.
Yeah, you even ended up cutting a Christmas record.
We did. Jamie, Will's son, Jamie McFarlane, had that idea floating around for a couple months, and finally everything came together and said, okay, let's do it, you know. And I think it turned out great. You know, it sounds like us in a lot of ways. Of course, we had access to a really nice studio, the Nut House. So.
Yeah. Another record that you're a big part of that I love is Donnie Fritz' One Foot in the Groove album.
Yeah.
That was pretty much the Decoys backing up Donnie
Pretty much.
at Dampen Studio.
Dan's, yeah.
How was it making that record?
Well, my remembrance of it was great. You know, I was just laid back and just went in there and played the songs. We knew the songs for the most part, you know, and we just went in there and cut it, you know. And Dan was great. It was cool hanging with him and watching him do his thing. I loved how he had at that time, he probably still does, but he had he was going through this speaker phase, you know, but he had like 7 or 8 different pairs of speakers hooked up at any given time. So he was always, you know, listening to different speakers. He had a cool place.
Yeah, and then a few years after that, you and Donnie went over to Japan for a tour too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we did.
And you mentioned earlier that, you know, the Decoys backed up Percy Sledge. You've done shows with Eddie Floyd or Candi Staton.
Well, you know, with the Decoys, I was the first one that moved here, okay? Everybody else was still kind of living in the Decatur area, you know. I moved here, and then we started playing at Union Station, and then Scott moved over here, then NC moved over here. So we kind of came apart, the band did, kind of came a part of this local scene. So then it got to a point where we'd get a call, well, you know, so-and-so's coming to town, can you back them up? And we're like, yeah, you know. And so we did. So I came up with the thing, like, we've kind of become like the house band, you know, because we kept backing up all these people that came through, you know, like Percy or Eddie or whoever, you know. So, yeah, we backed them up a lot.
Yeah. So earlier we talked a little bit about Scott Boyer, but I feel like we need to talk about him just a little bit more because the two of you were like brothers, really.
He was. We became fast friends. You know, he was
your best man.
The best man at my wedding, and you know, we shared a lot of memories and a lot of music. You know, we went to USO tour together for 7 weeks in the Mediterranean, and you can really get to know somebody good.
Yeah, there's some good stories from that tour.
There's great stories, man. I mean, you know, in life when you get old, it's what you're left with is your memories, you know, and hopefully they turn out to be good ones, you know. And I have nothing but good memories, you know. And I miss him every day, and you know, I mean, we've all lost people we loved, you know. So, but they stay a part of you.
Yeah.
You know?
And early last year, I've been trying to do that for a while. I wanted to get the Decoys to make another record.
Right.
And
you sure did, man. You put it together.
So ended up that it was pretty much the last strong performance in Scott's life.
Yeah, you know, we wanted to do it. I mean, we talked about it for years, you know, because I mean, really, in essence, the only record we did was that one we did at Fame, you know, and then, which is a tragedy because there were so many great songwriters and players, and we just never got to it. So you were instrumental in making that happen, and I know Scott wanted it too, you know. So, you know, I'd have done anything he wanted me to, you know. So
yeah, and I just remember it kind of, you know, and that's just looking back, but it just kind of, I guess it was
good
kind
night.
of
We had a good night.
It was a good night, and it's just like, you know, the fact that we were able actually to do it before Scott, you know, died or really got sick. I'm just so glad that we now have to, you know, that document.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a beautiful thing about music, man. It's a documentation of somebody's life, you know, whether they're still here or not, you know. So something that will always remain.
Yeah, absolutely. One thing I just briefly would like to talk about too, because it resulted in a few pretty memorable musical events, and there was you collaborating with your wife Tanya,
right?
Who's mainly in the, you know, film world, but there were some crossovers, like you were involved with soundtracks. There's the When I Get to the Ocean,
When I Find the Ocean,
When I Find the Ocean soundtrack, which I always liked that a lot.
Yeah.
But then you guys also did a 9/11 type of tribute.
Yeah, that was all
record.
Tanya's idea. I mean, after 9/11, I think it started that she had written some lyrics, you know, because everybody was pretty tore up about that when it happened. You know, it was a pretty big deal. But she'd come up with the lyrics and showed them to me one morning. We just sat down and we came up with the song, you know, and then we all got excited about it. And then she said, you know, we should cut a record and tribute to the memory of the firefighters of 9/11, and maybe try to do a charity kind of thing, you know, and sell them, and which was a great idea. But we ended up doing a whole double CD, you know, and she included everybody, the whole. I mean, there was like unbelievable amounts of musicians involved. And
there's this one track where like all the Muscle Shoals guitar players are.
Yeah, that was. We almost divorced over that one, but she had this vision of all these guitar players playing a melody or something, and I didn't want to do it. I said, no, I don't want to do it, you know. And the day that she had scheduled all of the guitar players to come down here and record the song, I had nothing written. The very day. That morning she came down, we have a little studio in our house, she came down and she hummed two notes to me. She goes, I hear ding-ding, ding-ding. And so I hit the chime on the guitar, ding-ding, and then I came up with a melody, and it came out in about 30 minutes, the melody, and I worked up a little demo of it. We went to Shoals Theater and recorded it. You know. It was a trip. 25 guitar players. We didn't record them all at the same time. You know, I put like 4 or 5 together, and they're all on there.
Yeah. So you know, we mentioned that you played in Fathers and Sons with Will, and Will's sons are musicians. Jamie is in it. How does it feel to pass that, you know, spark on?
Younger guys, you mean?
Yeah, your son is a musician,
Oh,
and
well,
your
you know,
daughter
a
is
lot
a
of it-
singer-songwriter.
You talking about the age difference?
No, I'm just talking about, it's like, it must feel good to actually kind of be able to pass that on to your kids.
Oh, I see
And
what you're
then
saying.
The others,
You know the thing about, I have 3 kids, a son and 2 daughters, and they knew what I did and they knew what their mother did. You know, we never forced it on them. It was never, you know, if anything, I was like, don't become a musician, you know, don't try to do it, you know, for a living. You know, basically the same thing my parents used to tell me. Well, learn how to do something else, and then you can go play your guitar, you know. So, but I mean, they're all artists in their own right, you know. Kyle is a drummer in Atlanta, has his own band, and Lily's an actress, and Abby plays guitars and writes songs and sings, but they do it all on their own, you know.
But you every now and then play with her.
Yeah, I played a few gigs with her. You know, she'll go, Dad, you need to learn this new Miranda Lambert song. But yeah, I've backed her up on the guitar, you know. She's still learning the guitar, but she does pretty good. But yeah, I've played a few local gigs with her, you know.
Yeah. So besides that, what do you got coming up?
Just more of the same, really, you know. Gigs and sessions, man, you know.
So if, like, you know, looking back on sessions, and you've done so many over the years, are there any ones that stick out more than others, like, oh, you know, this?
Well, yeah,
Gregg Allman
there's
thing?
definitely a few that you'll be like, you know, it's, you know, when you're young and you're learning about music and you're listening to music, and you kind of figure out who your heroes are pretty early on, you know. And for me to actually have played with a lot of my heroes is amazing to me, you know. I mean, so it's been a great road, you know. I basically achieved what I wanted to do, was play music and see the world, you know. Of course, it's nice to make money, and sometimes you do, sometimes you don't. But the passion's still there, you know. I still want to do it. So, yeah, you get fed up with it sometimes, but you get over it. I think when you get older, you get more accepting of things, you know what I mean? So,
Yeah.
accept it, put it behind you, and move on, you know.
So you, early on, you mentioned the Beatles' impact when you saw them on Ed Sullivan, and although I don't think you got a chance to play with Beatles, you got the chance to play in the studio with Klaus Foreman,
Klaus, yeah.
who was one of their main collaborators and played a lot on the
Yes, yeah,
John
I mean, he
Lennon
was
albums.
another name that I didn't know that much about him. I knew he was an artist. I knew he played bass with John Lennon's Ono band and Manfred Mann, and yeah. But I knew that he knew the Beatles from very early on in the Hamburg days, you know. And it just happened out of the blue. Our friend Don Nix in Memphis was friends with him. You know, he met him in the 70s when Don was hanging out with George Harrison, you know. And he called me and David Hood up one day and said that Klaus was going to do a solo record. He was going to come around to all these different studios around the world with all of his friends and cut a track or two, you know. So me and David got hired to go to Memphis at Ardent and play on a couple things for Klaus's record, you know. And which is cool because, you know, the cover of the record he's got all of the people that played on it drawn out with our cutout in it or something. But I got Paul McCartney's like right over my shoulder, you know, and I'm like, wow, this is cool, you know. So to go from watching him on Ed Sullivan Show to being on the same record, you know.
Yeah. So as far as bucket list, you probably got most of those crossed off.
Well, yeah, I mean, and Klaus was such a gentleman and such a nice guy that, you know, he was more than happy to answer any questions we had about the Beatles or anything. I remember one morning when we were getting there, I walked in the studio and there was a big box on top of the grand piano, and nobody was around, so I just kind of pulled the lid up and I noticed there was a lot of artwork in there, you know. And so he saw me looking at it, and so he came in. He said, yeah, you can have whatever you want out of there. And so I started pulling out, and David came in, and so he gave us some of his artwork, you know, which is really cool, man.
Yeah, that's iconic stuff.
I mean, it's all signed and numbered stuff, you know. It means a lot to me, you know. It's pretty cool. Have some of his original stuff.
Yeah. So tonight you're gonna be playing with Fathers and Sons, Will and all them, and I guess towards the end of the Decoys, when Scott couldn't handle as much of the vocal duties as he used to, you started to, you always sang a few songs, but you kind of started increasing that, and you're singing some too with Fathers and Sons.
Yeah,
but,
I never considered myself a singer, and I am rather uncomfortable singing. It's not, sometimes it comes to me naturally and sometimes it doesn't, you know, and it has to be a certain kind of song in order for me to sing it, you know. And I've never been good about remembering lyrics, you know, especially that many, you know, whereas for Will, it just seems effortlessly, you know, but he's been doing that a lot longer than I have. I've been in a band where I was not the singer. I've been in bands where I sang a lot, you know, but the past 30 years I haven't, so you tend to get lazy about it, I guess is the word, you know, about not singing. And I have a lot of people say, man, you need to sing more, and I'm going, well, you know, maybe not, I don't know. So.
Yeah, well, it's also like if you're so much known as the guitar player, that's, what people usually hire you for.
Yeah, I guess, you know. I just do what I can do, you know. If somebody wants me to try to sing a song, I'll be happy to. And if it turns out great or good, then I mean, I know pretty quick whether I can sing a song or not, you know. So.
Yeah, so I say thank you very much for spending this past hour with me. And the reason why I'm laughing is because whenever I think of you, you do this quack, 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 quack on the guitar.
Yeah.
Thank you and I'm like, that's to me, that's so Kelvin to me.
Yeah. Well, you know, I like to laugh, and I like to, you know, I just like to laugh with people, you know. Yeah, I mean, that's something I started doing way back in the 70s, you know. Just make my guitar say thank you very much, you know. So, I don't know.
Yeah, it's on the record too.
Sometimes it's an icebreaker, you know, if the night's kind of weird or...
Yeah. Well, anyway, thank you so much.
Hey, man, I've enjoyed the chat.
You have a fun gig tonight, and then, a lot of great, musical adventures.
The road is
coming
long and wide, man. Just keep on riding down the road.
This was the 45th episode of the Crazy Chester Radio Hour. If you enjoyed today's episode, please make sure to check out some of our earlier episodes with some other great musicians and music-minded people. And subscribe to the Crazy Chester Radio Hour podcast on iTunes, or check it out on SoundCloud, YouTube, TuneIn, or Stitcher. We taped today's episode at the Florence-Lauderdale Tourism Visitor Center in Florence, Alabama, part of the Muscle Shoals area. That's it for today. See you next week.